Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle from WeAreSC.com. We got the full allotment, all four guys here. It's going to be a streamlined version. It's not a war of attrition this week. It's in and out. It's special forces. We're going to hit you with a few topics, and I think some decent topics. We're getting closer to the season starting, so we'll continue with our season preview. First, though, everybody who watches this show knows that there are only a couple of guys that are still out there as potential takes for this number one ranked recruiting class, at least before the season starts. You have the offensive lineman Brett Colajay, who I don't think is going to make a decision anytime soon, but USC is holding a spot for him. And then they have two Texas wide receivers, both of whom I think are competing for one spot, if what we're told is right. And one of them is announcing tomorrow. So Ethan Boobie Feaster and Jalen Lott are the two. Feaster is announcing tomorrow, I think at noon Central Time, here in the Dallas area. So let's start with this. First of all, let's talk about Feaster and what kind of player we're looking at, and then maybe we'll talk about what we expect will happen and what that will mean for USC's class. Mark, you like to talk first. I'm going to let you jump in. What should we know about Boobie Feaster?
I like the fact that Boobie Feaster reclassified from 2027 into the 2026 class, and his ranking really didn't take an effect. I mean, he held his own. Usually, when a guy reclassifies, comes a year early, he kind of slots down a little bit into the class where people are older than him might have earned that ranking for those who follow the stars. So USC's adding another 5-star wide receiver, allegedly, if he kabooms for USC on July 4th. You're bringing in a wide receiver that I think is probably in the same mold as Jacoby Lane, same type of body, same type of athleticism. So assuming Jacoby, uses this as his final year, heads to the NFL, you're having somebody who can come in right away, step in, and start to show that, hey, you know what, I belong at, playing Division I football. The best part about this is you're going into Texas again, and you're taking him away from schools like Texas, Alabama, LSU. This is one of those recruiting situations where USC is saying, we're back. You know what? We have the number one class, and we're not done. We're going to continue to go with it. Boobie Feaster is considered the number one of the number one wide receivers in this recruiting cycle. USC's just doing what they've been doing so far with their number one class. They're just adding another one.
Guys, how tall is Feaster? I've seen a few different numbers hanging about. I've never seen him in person. 6'2" is the one that pops up the most. Do we think that's about right? 6'2" and a little over 200 pounds?
He looks taller than that.
I mean, Rivals has him listed at 6'1.5". So
I've seen 6'1". I saw somebody saying he was 6'4". I don't think he is. I don't know how tall he is.
He plays pretty big, right? I mean, he plays physically. He's got that like long stride. His long speed seems pretty good, and like physically he matches up well. So he's not listed at Jacoby Lane's like 6'4", and he's not sort of towering over people, but plays big, plays tall, plays like strong down the field too.
Yeah, and when you watch his highlights, one of the interesting thing is how many blocks he has included in those highlights, and it appears to be a physical blocker. He looks to me like he's shorter and thicker than Jacoby Lane. Actually, I haven't watched him. I haven't watched him play live. I've just watched his highlight videos. So take it with a grain of salt. My take was, he looked more like a Juju Smith-Schuster to me. I think he's more of a 6'2", 200, probably a guy who's going to play at 210, 215, physical, runs well, but isn't a blazer. I mean, he looked to me like a Juju type player, which I think we can all agree we would take if that's what he turns out to be. Greg, any thoughts on Ethan Boobie Feaster?
Well, I was excited to find out what his first name is, Ethan. But that isn't going to be as exciting as the person who makes headlines for him. Uh, I don't get overly excited generally about receivers, especially when they come to SC. I figure they're going to be good. Okay, depends on how good. Um, I think he'll provide a lot of interesting sidebars and how he is and what he does, and the fact he's from Texas, then Louisiana. It all adds up to what we've seen from out of state recruits at this point. Um, I hope they get him, of course. But, you know, is he a difference maker? I don't know if he's a difference maker, but I know that he thinks he's good enough to come in a year earlier than his original graduating class, which I think says something about him. Uh, you know, at this point, and I hate to, I know I bring this up and everybody goes, "Well, someone just shut him up." They still have to be signed. They still have to be signed. And like I've said before, I think most of them will sign. Do I think all of them will sign? I wouldn't put money on that all of them will sign, but then there might be somebody who's out there that decommits somewhere else and comes to USC out of seemingly nowhere, but that's not usually how it works out of nowhere. But I think that he's the type of player that they need. They know that. And I think the important thing is that he's able to contribute, and hopefully they can get him the ball when it's his time to show up.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a guy who's been talking about how if you go to USC, then you're playing a Lincoln Riley offense. You're likely going to have a quarterback who can get the ball to you. You're going to throw the ball a lot, and you're probably going to get developed as a wide receiver. All of which are pretty compelling reasons to go apart from NIL. And I'm sure USC's NIL offer is at least competitive. If Feaster commits to USC tomorrow, as expected, it sounds like USC would no longer have room for Jalen Lott. Is anybody hearing anything different on that?
No, it seems like one more receiver, right? It gives you 5 in the class and seems done.
Yeah. That's assuming, of course, that Lott is going to play receiver. I think he wants to rather than safety, but and Lott's a pretty intriguing prospect himself. He's I think he might be. My take is he might be a little bit more athletic than Feaster. I'm not sure he's as physical, but he's a long jumper, high jumper. He's a jumper of some type and a good one. So I guess we'll see tomorrow. Scott Schrader will be at the announcement here in the Dallas area. I think he's at DeSoto High School. That's usually a good sign for the good guys. A bunch of people have already put in their predictions. So we know from the Luke Wafel thing a couple weeks ago that these things are never in the bag before announcement time. They're not necessarily in the bag before they show up on campus or the week after. But I think everybody at this point expects Feaster to make that commitment, and that will be really almost the end of USC's recruiting class up until at some point during the season itself, it seems to me. So any other thoughts on that, guys, before we move on? All right, I'm going to take that as a no.
I think like Wafel was for the defensive line, where without him, you still feel good about that class, right, that group. Without if Feaster goes to A&M, I think the wide receivers, and especially you have that maybe that one spot where you look for someone senior year, like the 4 they already have, not crazy highly recruited, but some good players in there. Feaster gives you that kind of elite guy on top, and we'll see how it plays out. I think a couple of these guys, right? Mosley, Trent Mosley, if you're looking for just a football player that you think is going to be a good college guy, I think he's one of those guys. But when you look at the recruiting class and rankings and whatever, like tagging a guy with the physical ability of Feaster on top of that group is, again, every single position group in this class is just unreal right now.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I also, it does matter whether you're landing these 5-star guys, not because every 5-star is going to succeed and not because you can't land 3 stars who are great, but you're more likely to hit when you're getting 5 stars. The numbers are pretty clear on that. And I think it means something when a kid who everybody wants from Texas decides to go to USC. That helps give additional credibility to your program with all the other kids you're recruiting who are, going into their sophomore years, freshman years, who look at Boobie Feaster as a guy who is where they want to be at some point. So it's a good thing if it happens, which I think we all suspect it will. Okay. We're now on game 4 of our season preview, and I think you could say that the way the schedule plays, it sort of ratchets up a little bit every week. You start with Missouri State. I don't think anybody expects them to have a pulse. Then you have Clay Helton's team, maybe slight pulse, but you're going to have to be an experienced medical professional to find it. Then you move to Purdue, first road game, but a bad football team. Then 4th, Michigan State at the Coliseum. Okay. Who wants to start? USC's had some interesting Michigan State games over the year. I mean, they played them twice in 87, lost to them both times, once in the Rose Bowl. I remember that. Magic Johnson played at Michigan State. That's cool. So what is it exactly we expect from Michigan State? How should USC fans be thinking about this one, Eric?
I think it would be much more concerning if this was at Michigan State in 2026. I think getting them 2025 after a top-down full-scale rebuild that they had to do going into last year, and getting them at home in the Coliseum. I think those are 2 significant advantages for USC in this one. There's always that second-year jump for coaches when they come in and take it over. And so Michigan State is going to be better in 2025 than they were in 2024. If USC defensively is as good as I think we all think they're going to be, this is one of those games where you roll out that defensive line, you control the ball, you score enough points, and you win. Aiden Childs at quarterback, I think, is a good quarterback. We know Jonathan Smith is a good coach. But you're not rolling out a USC defense anymore where you say, well, Michigan State's going to score 32 points, and how are we going to, get over the top of that? So I think that's sort of where it is. Again, at this point in the offseason, am I going to go down and be able to tell you every single one of Michigan State's starters on offense and defense and everything they're going to do? No, but
that was your job, though.
I know overall skill level and what they're going to bring at this point, again, in that rebuild, it's a talent issue on both sides, and USC is back to, in these games at home specifically, until we know they can do it on the road, being able to kind of lean on what they have and beat teams like this. Now, I will say Michigan State did go to Maryland and win last year, so maybe they're feeling confident about matching up with USC.
Yeah, well, and they beat Iowa last year, and I think they held Iowa to 20, which may have been Iowa's high score of the year. I don't know. Greg, Michigan State, as Eric pointed out, is in the middle of a gigantic rebuild. This is a team that I think everybody agrees is fighting for a bowl shot, right? This is a team that might have a shot at 6 wins. But I know you are a big fan of Jonathan Smith. Should USC be worried about Jonathan Smith in his second year of the program?
Well, I don't know if they should be worried about them, but that's not a bad word. Jonathan Smith right now is not being illuminated to the point where the normal fan would say, oh, yeah, Jonathan Smith's there. But we know that he's there. We know what he's done. He knows Lincoln Riley. He knows the offense. He's got an idea about the defense. Knowledge can really help. Now, is Michigan State going to be intimidated going to the Coliseum? I wouldn't think so, mainly because they've played in front of big crowds in the Big Ten, most of those players. Now, there's going to be some awe. I remember when Ohio State came out here several years ago, and they lost to the Trojans. And I remember being on the field for warm-ups, and one of the Ohio State administrators came out of the famed Coliseum tunnel, and walked over to me and said, "Boy, this is really intimidating." And I'm saying to myself, well, this is kind of nice to see somebody else's perspective that's never been here. And my feeling is that Jonathan Smith will know how to deal with coming into the Coliseum. He's a really good coach. I mean, he's really a good coach. And my feeling is they'll compete. They're not going to fall over. I mean, we're not talking about a USC team that's already established 3 years from now. We're talking about the one that's this year. And I think there's one thing I can say safely: they'll be physical. They'll be really physical. And you know what? That'll probably be the most physical game they have played in the early third of the season. So it'd be interesting to see how they react to that. So, with Jonathan Smith at coaching, I have a lot of confidence they'll at least make it really interesting, at least at the beginning. And it depends on how SC's offense can score points, to be honest with you.
I mean, Mark, we do have some historical issues. The Spartans did, in fact, beat the Trojans. And granted, that was a long, long time ago, and the gods were involved. So I don't know what to make of that. But what do you see? What do you see in this Michigan State game? Is this a game that USC fans should be worried about? Is this something that you're excited about yourself? What do you think?
I'm excited because it's, Trojans versus Spartans. You can, write that little narrative there. But look, this is Jonathan Smith's second year. This team isn't going to be good this year. It'll happen next year. It's usually the way things work with Jonathan Smith. Give him 3 years, and all of a sudden they're really good. They're competitive, and to what Greg was talking about, they'll punch you in the mouth. They're going to play. They're not going to come in and roll over. With that said, their roster is still going through a lot of turnover, a lot of transfers, a lot of them from the FCS level. They brought in a running back from Sacramento State who statistically is going to be their best running back. So that's someone to look out for. I imagine they're going to want to kind of take the air out of the ball, kind of slow the game down a little bit to give themselves a chance to stay in the game. But if you're asking, well, should USC fans be concerned? A little bit, only because this is the game right before USC travels to go play Illinois. So hopefully they're not looking ahead to that game where, I think Eric mentioned this on a show a couple of weeks ago. Potentially you might have 2 top 10 teams facing off in Champaign. So you don't want USC looking ahead 1 week. Focus on Michigan State, take care of business. And again, this is you're coming home after playing Purdue. You won't have been challenged yet during this season. Missouri State, Georgia Southern, Purdue on the road, which is in even worse shape than Michigan State. You can't come home and think you're going to get a week off because you're just playing another poor team at home. So that's really the concern. Just make sure you stay focused.
Yeah, the schedule shakes out pretty well for USC. It seems to me they increase the level of difficulty just a little bit every week, those first 4 weeks. But you still look at this game and say USC has no business losing this game at home. If they do, we're in a whole lot of trouble, right? A whole lot of trouble. Michigan State's just not very good. They're well coached. They're gonna have some players on the team, which you probably can't say about Missouri State, right? They probably don't have anybody that can play at USC. Michigan State will have some guys that can play at USC. There's no doubt about it. But overall, they're just not very good. USC should handle this team. If USC's defensive front is what I expect them to be, they should force Michigan State to throw the ball and have a pretty good time of it. But it does mean that you're ramping up and getting some experience, hopefully for the full roster before that Illinois game, which we'll talk about next week. Yeah, actually, now that I think about it, starting next week, we're going to have a lot more interesting game matchups to talk about. So let's talk then about the 4 of us voted, and selected the 30 most important players. Most important or most valuable? What did we say most important, Eric?
So it was like it ended up being sort of a mix because it's so hard to just pin down exactly one thing. So it's important, it's valuable, it's talented, it's necessary. It's just sort of the way we wanted to find the top 30 players for this year. And I weighted the votes. Like mine obviously count for 6 times what
I would hope so.
Yeah. I didn't think I needed to tell you guys that ahead of time, but
no, I appreciate it. Well, what I like about this is, and if people think our list is stupid, they know who to blame.
They always do.
I know we've only actually, my experience is that people all the time think we say things on this show that we've never even said. It's very strange when that happens. So we have 2 names, our first 2 of the 30 that you've unveiled on the website. By the way, if you're not a member, WeAreSC.com, come on, get your act together. I don't know why I keep having to tell you people this. Get on the message boards. There's a lot of good content, especially as we're getting close to the season. We're going to getting, practice reports, coach interviews, this sort of thing. So get over there. We've unveiled the first 2 names. Number 30 on the list, which not necessarily the 30th best player on the team. I think he might be better than that. But in terms of most important, Brian Jackson, sophomore running back from McKinney, Texas. Greg, let's start with you. What makes Brian Jackson valuable to this year's USC team, and what do you expect to see from him?
Well, he's shown sparks in the past. I mean, if you watched him, you'd say this guy has a lot of ability. But you know what? Is he going to get the shot that he probably deserves? I mean, they did bring in 2 transfer running backs, and I don't think it makes a lot of sense that if you bring in transfer running backs and they don't play, that's going to be pointed out next time you're going to try to get transfer running backs. I don't know. I think Brian Jackson, if he doesn't see a lot of playing time this year, I don't know what his future at USC will be based on the way criteria is in today's college football world. But I hope he gets the opportunity to play. Honestly speaking, the only time that the media has been able to watch USC for the most part is, 20 minutes into practice doing, workouts and drills and stuff like that. We don't get to see the latter third when they're actually maybe hitting and really running the ball and doing what they do. So, this is kind of what you think, as opposed to what you actually see, which, practice is really important to make evaluations on players. And then to see how they take that to a regular game. I don't know. He might be higher on a list. Since we're talking about lists, believe it or not, my number 30 player was not Brian Jackson was 20 for me on a scale of 20 to 30. My number 30, believe it or not, was Hussein Longstreet because I felt that he is really important because if some reason Mayava at quarterback gets hurt or he doesn't come through and Lincoln decides he's going to do what he did before and replace quarterbacks, how important is Longstreet going to be? He's going to be right there. So
we'll see. 30. We'll see whether Longstreet comes up on the list later. I'll tell you, I had him on mine too because that's a guy who can go from 30 to 1 in one play. So we'll see what comes up. Mark, Brian Jackson didn't get a ton of reps in games last year until bowl game, and he played a lot against Texas A&M. What do you expect to see from Jackson this year?
Well, Greg mentioned if you're a transfer running back, hopefully you're getting some play. That hasn't been a problem for any of USC's transfer running backs. They show up, they're the running back. So Brian Jackson is USC's, I would say, their power back, the guy you want to use in that goal line situation. But he's shown that if you give him the ball, he can pick up yards. He can run between the tackles, whether it's, starting at the 20-yard line, the 50-yard line, wherever. That's the question. Is he going to get enough touches. And everyone, so far, Waymon Jordan's name has been the running back coming out of spring camp. He's the guy. You also brought in Eli Sanders, who's supposed to be the shifty speed back guy, who also is very different from Brian Jackson. Brian Jackson has that unique skill set. He is the biggest running back on the roster right now. If USC is going to go and become that physical Big Ten team, you would think you would be utilizing him a little bit more this season. He showed us what he can do in the bowl game. You know, last year you had Woody Marks. He got the lion's share of the carries. After that, it was just, you know, here's a carry for you, here's a carry for you. This season, you have to define who's number one, who's number two, and make sure you're keeping those guys involved. Because Greg mentioned it a second ago, if Brian Jackson isn't going to be involved this season, he's probably not going to be at USC next season, because you're bringing in a couple more running backs, and you've got to, if you're the veteran on the, you know, in the room, you would think by your third year, you're the guy. And if you're not, it's probably time to move on. I hope he doesn't. I like his game. Just got to use him.
Yeah, Eric, I think we talked after the A&M game, and I think we were both in agreement that if Brian Jackson was your number one back going into next year, you'd feel pretty good about the situation. He is a very much a Big Ten running back, right? This is a big kid, runs hard. USC had to bring in somebody from outside because they didn't have the depth in the running back room. But once you bring in a Waymon Jordan, you've got to expect that Waymon Jordan is going to be number one on your depth chart. What does Brian Jackson have to do to get real time and make a contribution this year?
I think you got a pass block. That's big. I mean, you got a pass block, you got to hold on to the football, and you have to create yards after contact. I think those are those are three big things for the backs in this offense. Catching the ball in the backfield is big too. There wasn't enough. The USC backs didn't create enough by themselves last year. If you look at numbers, the offensive line and blocking schemes, and really defenses just not loading the box a ton and making and having it work out to where USC had to run into a loaded box. It didn't happen all that often. So Woody Marks is getting touched, 4 yards downfield throughout all of last year, and then a lot of times brought down right away. So I think if you get a back who can really create yards after contact and do some things for himself, that's big. And I think Jackson has that sort of mix of enough quickness with some kind of heft behind him when he runs that I think that'll be interesting. I think it's also, USC got through all the regular season last year relying really heavily on just one back. If they win a bunch of games and that season's going longer and Woody Marks is now out in your last game of the regular season, then that becomes tough to go. So I don't. They've always sort of gone. Lincoln Riley has always sort of deferred to one guy at the top, and that's been the bulk of the carries, bulk of the touches has gone to one guy. I'm curious with that injury and what the depth chart looks like. Hey, we really got to sprinkle 3 guys in, and then there's that balance between, can you keep one guy, can you keep everybody hot if you're using a bunch of different guys? I think the running back kind of way it shapes up this year is really fascinating, and one of the biggest kind of questions going in for the offense, because you need more, I think, from the running backs, just in terms of can we give it to them and still get positive output when the defense is saying, no, we're going to try to stop the run. And I think that's a big thing for an offense, because do you want to throw the ball to Jacoby Lane and Mekhi Lemon downfield and pick up 19 yards of play? Sure. But if the success rate on that is, 50-50 or 60-40, and you could run the ball and pick up 5 yards 90% of the time, then it becomes a how do you want to operate the offense? I think Jackson could potentially be a big part of that, but I think 30 is kind of right, because if you're three, right, if you're three among the running backs, there may not be a ton of touches for you. But I think special teams, right? He's been a special teams guy too, and that's, you got to factor that into your, you know, how you impact the team.
He didn't even make my top 30 most important list. I mean,
I didn't have him on 30 either, just outside, but not in my top 30.
Yeah, I think everybody expects Wayman Jordan to be a guy who is going to be able to break tackles, who is going to get you yards after contact. That seems to be the consensus.
Yeah.
And if Wayman Jordan is doing that, then your number 2 back, your change of pace back, is probably going to be Eli Sanders, because he can give you something explosive. Which I don't think anybody really expects Brian Jackson. Brian Jackson is not going to have 70-yard touchdown runs. What you want from him is get you a lot of 7-yard runs. And so I think if Wayman Jordan stays healthy, I think it might be a struggle for Brian to get carries this year, as good as I think he is, and I think he's good. But it's hard to imagine him getting 10 carries a game if Wayman Jordan is what we expect him to be and is healthy. I think he's going to get the carries. But I'm with Eric in that the running game has to be more physical than it was last year. USC's run game last year was efficient. They had really good yards per carry, and made some plays on the ground, but it was not a physical run game. It wasn't a run game where you can pick up 3 yards even if the defense does its job. It wasn't the sort of run game where you're running through linebacker arm tackles and picking up 12 instead of 5. And Brian Jackson could do that for you, I think. But I think Wayman Jordan can too. So I think it may be tough for Brian, but you never know. Look, running back is a position where you never know how deep you're going to have to go in the depth chart. For all we know, Harry Dalton may be starting in Game 6. So we will see.
Well, the offensive line is going to play a large role in which running back gets the most production. So, I mean, you just talked about not letting a linebacker. Remember that Washington game? I mean, that game pretty much ended when USC couldn't convert that 4th and goal. And you had a freshman linebacker, Kamari House, who, stopped you right there at the goal line.
Yeah.
Maybe if you hand the ball off to Brian Jackson, it doesn't happen. Who knows?
Yeah.
That's big too, see. Right? Finding success, goal to go inside the 5. It wasn't always a struggle. Like USC still did pretty well, red zone scoring, that sort of thing. Like nationally, it wasn't elite like Lincoln Riley's offenses have been. And the caveat there is when Caleb Williams is taking snaps, it was elite. Scoring touchdowns, inside the 5, inside the 10. But man, being able to hand it to a guy and just punch it in from 3 yards out every time, that would change a lot of the feel from that team last year. And you still have, right, a quarterback that you want to be able to settle in. And I'm interested to see, do they go, we talked about how they could use 2 tight ends a lot. Like, do you want to go 22 personnel sometimes and be the Big Ten team that we all kind of, thought that you were getting when you went into this conference? Hey, everyone's going to run the ball. And Chris, like, you've looked at rushing numbers and all of that, and it's not all like that in the Big Ten. Like, they throw the ball a ton out here, and if USC decided to show up with Brian Jackson and Wayman Jordan and 2 big tight ends and just run it at people, while Jaden Mayava doesn't have to carry the load and throw it 65% of the time, then you've got a home for Brian Jackson a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know what Lincoln Riley really wants from his offense, but I suspect he wants an offense where he can run the ball consistently and take some pressure off Jaden Mayava. I'm not sure that's what he wanted with Caleb Williams there. You say, with Caleb inside the 5, you're highly likely to score. Inside your own 5 with Caleb Williams, you're highly likely to score. I mean, there were games where USC scored almost every possession with Caleb Williams. They're not going to be able to do that this year, I don't think. But if they do have success like that, it's going to be because they develop a much more physical running game and don't put everything on Jaden Mayava's shoulders, which and I think Mayava will be improved. I think he'll be a good player, but he's not Caleb Williams, and you can't have him you can't have him as the solo act that needs to score for you every possession. So we'll see what happens with Brian. Good player. I think we're all excited about his future, and hopefully he'll get a shot. Number 29 on the list, one of many defensive backs. USC needs a couple of young defensive backs to step up this year. I think we all know that. That number 29 on our list, Braylon Conley from Texas, a guy who got all kinds of good press in practice, which we didn't see, but along with Marcellus Williams is a guy who the coaching staff seems to be very excited about. Do we think Conley's going to get on the field? And if so, what do we expect to see from him? Mark.
I think you're going to see him on the field. He's going to be part of the two deep. I have zero doubt about that. Whether or not he's going to be able to be, one of the starters, one of the cornerback ones, I think that's going to be determined during fall camp. He's got the experience. He flashed. He's shown everybody what he's capable of doing in his limited opportunities. So it's just a matter of, is it his time? You've got DeCarlos Nicholson returning, who's another veteran. You have Prophet Brown, who is returning. He's another veteran. You brought in DJ Harvey from San Jose State. He's got a lot of experience. Whether DJ plays cornerback, whether he plays nickel, I guess that's still to be determined. Braylon Conley's going to be in the rotation. Is he going to be USC's next cornerback guy that, all of a sudden is like, oh, where's he been? Got him on the bench, and now he's turning into, oh gosh, the guy who just got drafted, number 2.
Jalen Smith.
Thank you. Mind fart. Yes. Does he turn into another Jalen Smith? We'll find out. Again, you got Marcellus Williams also, who going into last year was supposed to be the guy, and then injury kind of set him back, and we didn't see him at all in 2024. So yeah, you got Marcellus, you got Braylon, you got the aforementioned veterans. How much does Braylon play in 2025 is really the question.
Greg, we saw last year, Danton Lynn at some positions really liked to have the veterans in there, and he would play the veterans every down until they collapsed on the field, right? Particularly at linebacker. Is corner one of those spots where you're less excited to have a young guy on the field? And do you think Lynn wants to play these young guys, or do you think that Lynn is hoping they can play some special teams, fill in late, and maybe be a starter a year or two down the road?
Well, I think simply put, he wants to play the best guys. And if the best guy is a young player, he's going to play, because they're in a position where they have to look at the productive results. And I don't think they're worried. I mean, the message they'll send if they play young players is the players that they have coming in the future will know that when they get there, they might have a chance to play and really play, rather than just say, well, they told me this, and when I got there, it didn't turn out to be how I thought it was going to be. I think that the secondary and the corners, I'm not that concerned about their production per se. I want them to see their athletic ability, their knowledge of the game show up, because a lot of times that could be the difference. They don't get sucked into plays. They don't have blown coverages, all that sort of stuff. Like all sports, there's a lot to it that if you've played, I'm not saying you can't know what you're seeing and doing and making a proper evaluation, but when you played, you understand the complexities of a position like cornerback. You understand how to discipline yourself, how to be in the right fundamentals. People don't want to see cornerbacks getting caught for pass interference all the time, or getting beat or blown coverage. So the cornerbacks that we're going to see on the field, I'm going to go with the faith that they're the best that have shown in practice, because where else have they seen except for last year that they played? So this is their opportunity. So it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes down.
I didn't even mention Chasen Johnson, who transferred over as well. He probably has the most experience.
Yeah, it certainly hasn't been in college football as long as DeCarlos and Profit, but he played a lot of snaps last year. Eric, I think if you polled USC fans on the defensive players they're most excited to see this year, I think you'd get a lot of votes for guys like Cameron Fountain. You get votes for Jakeem Stewart. You'd get votes for Eric Gentry. I don't know that you'd get a ton of votes for DeCarlos Nicholson or Prophet Brown, although it sounds like the USC coaches are actually pretty high on those guys. Is it your understanding that that the coaching staff thinks those guys are going to get slotted in as starters and play well? Because if so, then Conley will get some snaps, but probably not a ton.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Doug Belk talked about that last year, wanting to play, 8, 10 guys in the secondary, and looking at snap counts, it was pretty consistently in that number, 10, 11, you'd get into there. And so I think at corner, just the outside corners, forget nickel. I think you need 5 to go. I mean, there were 4 that played a ton last year, and you had 4 guys that were like ninth year seniors playing for you, and you don't have all those guys this year. So somebody's got to go. Somebody's got to get ready to take a ton of snaps of that kind of young group. And I think I had like 5 outside corners within like 8 or 9 slots of each other in my top 30. And it's an important spot. It's an important spot. We talked about, yeah, in the Big Ten, you have this like long-term, long-standing feel of, oh, they're just going to run the ball and run the ball and run the ball. And yeah, you had that at Michigan, but they throw it a lot. They throw it a lot in this conference. You better be able to cover guys. You better be able to run. You better be able to tackle on the outside. And I think Braylon Conley can do all those things. How that group shapes up is interesting. I thought Dan Lynn had a kind of an interesting comment after spring ball when we were able to spend some time with the coaches. And he said, I felt that whole group, talking about the secondary, that whole group did well, took a big step forward, but no one person out at corner was like, oh, that's the guy. That was the guy this spring. And it's always going to be that when you still want competition to be going and all that. But the coaches also haven't been shy about saying, hey, that guy was really good. That guy kind of separated. He played really well. So I think Conley is in that group, kind of gaining confidence. Trevon Reed, the new corners coach, is wanting to get a look at everybody that he has there. And so I think Conley's going to be in that group. I think it's wrong to dismiss Prophet Brown and DeCarlos Nicholson as, especially a guy like Prophet. Oh, he's been here for a long time. He's never really carved out a spot. I think those guys are going to be in the mix too. I think Conley has some real upside just in terms of athletic ability, physical ability, and how he's played in practice, what you've heard about him from coaches and players too, where could be a big second year jump for him.
Yeah, and that's a place where you often see, I mean, that year between your freshman and sophomore years, you see a lot of guys improve pretty dramatically. I'm a big believer in this coaching staff in the secondary. I thought they did a really nice job with Jalen Smith last year. I think there's enough talent there that I think you're going to have some guys step up and play well. I don't know that you're going to have any first team all Big Ten guys at those positions, but I think you're going to have guys that can play well. And I think USC's defense, the supporting cast, will help them in a way that our corners haven't been helped in a long time, right? I mean, last year USC played fundamentally sound. They couldn't rush the passer. They couldn't. The 2 years before that with Alex Grinch, USC every once in a while would rush the passer, usually against really bad teams and not against good teams. But so often Alex Grinch is putting those guys in impossible situations with the coverage, as he calls, and I don't need to beat on that dead horse. I talked about it on a weekly basis a couple of years ago. I couldn't imagine playing corner for Alex Grinch. I think these guys will benefit from a better pass rush, and I think they will benefit from a defense that does a pretty good job against the run and forces a lot of 2nd and 9s, 3rd and 7s. That's what I'm expecting, and that it is much easier to play corner if that's what's going on. So we'll see. But yeah, Braylon Conley is a talented kid that I think there's been enough chatter from the coaching staff about him that it would not shock me if he made a big jump. Okay, a couple more quick topics. And I don't know if we have anything specific about this, but we've been talking for some time about how USC finally seems to have things lined up to once again be an elite program. You had the coaching staff that needed to be fixed. It was. You had the recruiting and administrative side of it, which needed an influx of talent. They got a dramatic influx of talent, including arguably the best GM around right now in Chet Bowden. The NIL had to be improved. It's been dramatically improved. I think Jen Cohen deserves a lot of credit for that, in addition to Bowden and Riley. And so this is something we've been talking about, but only recently have the national media started to say, yeah, you know what? I think something's going on at USC. And Steve Wilfong had an article this past week. It's up on the On3 website at WeAreSC.com, sort of talking about this. Guys, anything that Wilfong said resonated with you? I mean, I think this is similar to what we've all recognized, but now it's coming from a guy who's not just an SC guy. Eric?
Yeah, I threw a comment on the message board. I think what stood out was Lincoln Riley in one of the quotes specifically talked about, some exciting things are coming up, and he threw out that fair market value term. And that to me feels like USC. The bottom line is nobody really knows how all this stuff is going to go in terms of the NIL go and the clearinghouse and what is a $600 deal, right? You have to clear all $600 deals. Is that real? Is that not real? How does this go? But it sure feels like USC feels like they've got an answer to this and how they can best position themselves going forward. And this has been something where whenever you ask Chad Bowden and Lincoln Riley about kind of what's your plan, how are you tackling this, they've been very, I don't want to say cagey, but they're not exactly running out there going, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. They've been very clear. We've got a plan. We're going to do this. We understand how this is going to go. We're set for anything and however it goes. And I think it seems like the LA market, the USC brand, the fact that they have had big time guys go through here and sign a bunch of real NIL deals. I mean, I think that's where the frustration of USC's NIL previously, where they didn't just throw out a bunch of money and say, our slush fund is NIL. Like you had to, not 100% of the time, but a bulk of it was like, go get real NIL stuff. That's how we're going to do this, right? Caleb Williams is in national commercials. He's signed with, big time brands. Where USC can now say, no, this is our comp, right? This is our comp, and this is what we've done, and this is what NIL deals should be for a USC quarterback, running back, receiver, whatever it is. And I think they feel like they have a pretty strong leg to stand on, whereas a lot of other programs, I think it's been, well, our NIL deals have been do nothing for this tiny nothing and get $1.2 million, right? I mean, so what you hear out there a lot is, oh, this is gonna, chickens are gonna come home at some point for USC. They're not gonna be able to do this, but feels like they're confident in how they're gonna do it. And USC has never been a program. I mean, since the Reggie Bush stuff, they do not go out on a limb. They do not guess maybe we'll be okay on this. Like they are buttoned up on everything that they do when it comes to this stuff.
So this business about the clearinghouse and NIL deals, some people watching this probably need a little bit of an explanation. In the House settlement, that was the class action settlement that was just recently approved, that the NCAA and the conferences are using as sort of their guide to how this is all going to work. There is going to be a clearinghouse for NIL deals, name, image, and likeness deals, which means that somebody's actually going to be looking at them and saying, is this a market deal for an endorsement by this guy or is it just pay for play called NIL, right? And I know a lot of fans are worried about that process. I'll say this: I can't promise you that the accounting firm is going to do everything right. I can't promise you that the arbitrator will always get things right. I can tell you this is a very common thing in the law to try to figure out fair market value. There are experts who do. There are entire industries built out of this celebrity endorsement world. And there are people, I've used them as expert witnesses. There are people who can tell you that actor, that company, I can tell you what that's worth, because there is a market that's built out. It's just not as obvious to all of us because we don't, it's not like publicly traded stock where you can just go on the internet and see the numbers. I think USC believes they have an advantage because they are in the nation's second largest media market. And there is a difference in endorsement deals in Los Angeles and Eugene, Oregon. There just is. How big of an advantage is that going to be for USC? I don't know. Is it enough to overcome the, let's just call them the high tax rates in the state of California? I don't know. I hope so. But I do think USC is excited about that. And while there are some players, like Tim Tebow was going to be a national star and will get national commercials, even though Gainesville is not a very big town, right? But that's not true of most players. And the question is, if USC has a guy that has some market value but isn't a household name across the country, is he likely to get better legitimate NIL deals at USC than he would in Lincoln, Nebraska? I think USC's view is, of course. And so that could very well be an advantage for USC. Mark, Greg, on this topic of USC finally getting their ducks in a row so they can rejoin the elite at some point soon. Anything else that came up in Wiltfong's article or his interview with Riley that caught your attention, or did we cover it all?
No, we've covered this before. I mean, and everything that you and Eric just mentioned, I talked about this. Location. That makes your fair market value different than everybody else's. The fact that Waymon Jordan already has a deal inked, and I'm not sure what the exact value is, but it looks like it's pretty good. You can't get that same type of deal if you're Waymon Jordan playing in Stillwater, Oklahoma. It just doesn't happen. You have a larger market to play to. You have more opportunities. And that's what has everybody across the country kind of shaking their head going, man, USC hasn't been doing anything with NIL. All of a sudden now, these rules are in place and they're in the lead. They have more advantages than anybody else. You know, if Rutgers wants to take advantage of the New York market, they could be, the USC on the East Coast when it comes to fair market value.
Except that nobody on the East Coast cares about Rutgers football. Exactly. But yes.
Ohio State's already complaining about how things are going with NIL. In fact, there's a lot of talk with the whole Ohio State market going, I don't know how we compete with this. So
my heart bleeds for those guys, by the way. I don't want to get all teary-eyed on you right now, but when I hear Ohio State complaining that they just don't have an NIL advantage like other schools, it makes me really sad.
Look, and that's just the thing. USC is in a position to take advantage of their location, their prestige, their history, their tradition. All that was built for 100 years. And now all of a sudden you've got rules in place that you get to take advantage of that history, that tradition, that foundation that you laid to become USC, the blue blood. It is what it is. And, as Kobe Bryant used to say, deal with it.
I think the Pete Carroll era proved that if you get the right guy in this market in Los Angeles that understands the tradition, the acceptance by the local people in this area of the country, that you can really, really go after the very elite programs, because SC is an elite program when they're doing it right. My feeling is and Mark is really right on this. You can't. There's some things that Ohio State can't do, Notre Dame can't do, and that is the location of Los Angeles, the beaches, the amusement parks, the the people here, they can't recreate it. It's not them. It's not their culture. They can do great things. I don't always get too turned upside down over people supporting the NIL. I mean, Oregon has got people supporting the NIL, but let's face it, Phil Knight, the head of Nike, is really the man who leads the charge for them. But most of these big time programs have some really elite monetary people. We see that in Texas. Texas A&M is an example. Texas, and what it really comes down to is no matter how much you're successful in the NIL and that sort of stuff, you still got to win football games. You cannot win football games on paper. Right now, everybody's on a justifiable high with USC for players that aren't going to even be here until at least another year. And the point is, you have to go with what you see right now, and that'll all come into focus once the season starts. So in the end, as exciting as all this is, and it'll be just as exciting in December when they start signing. It's really still going to get down to how USC's football team plays and what people think of how they're being handled and coached and all that sort of stuff. So, whether Boobie comes to be a wide receiver at USC or the NIL is millions in the money category for players. In the end, this is just my opinion. I think we're going to see some big explosions when it comes to certain programs that either can't keep up or have misspent or misevaluated players. And then how are you going to adjust to that? What are you going to do about that? All 90 players aren't going to get the same amount of money. Okay, so how is that going to come into effect in terms of a team situation, and how is SC going to handle that within their own program in terms of the NIL? So there's a lot that's going into this, but it is something that's going to come to a head at some point. But in the end, the point is going to be what's the score on the scoreboard, because that's going to be what people remember for the moment.
Yeah, I don't think it's an accident that 3 of your Final Four last year were Oregon, Ohio State, and Texas, gigantic NIL spenders. It's not an accident. Those programs have other things going for them. But let's not kid ourselves. There's a reason why those teams were in it. And the fact that USC is now playing the same game and playing it at least as well as those programs are is important, because you're not going to win national titles without great players. You're not. Now, I don't know that USC is going to win a national title this year. I'm not crazy. I'm not making that prediction, but I am going to say that they'll be better, and they're going to be better because the offense is going to be more explosive, and that brings us to our final question of the day. Give me just one name. McKinney, don't give me 4. Just give me 1. Greg, don't give me a long explanation that involves a shot at Lincoln Riley. Just give me 1. Okay.
The same thing goes for you, my friend.
Well, I can do whatever I want. I'm in charge.
I know you're the great guru of the huddle. We all appreciate that, respect it.
All right.
So what the hell are you asking?
I'll put myself to the same standard. Here we go. Mark Holkin's going first. I trust him on this. Mark, give me the name of the most explosive offensive player for USC this coming year.
I'm glad I'm going first. It's Makai Lemon. It's easy. What he does on offense at wide receiver, he duplicates on special teams as a returner. He is what everyone thought Zachariah Branch was going to be. But Makai Lemon is that dude, and he hasn't even tapped his potential yet. It's crazy how good he can be. He's so good. Lincoln Riley's taken him to Big Ten Media Days. It's time to show him off.
That's a good answer. That's a really good answer. Does anybody have a different answer? Eric, is that your guy, or are you going to give us a different name?
Yeah, look, I love that Mark suggests this question, then goes first, then takes the answer. So I'm going to go way off the board. Zacharias Williams. I think he comes in and he makes a real impact. And when Kyle Whittingham says about a guy, a wide receiver, he could be a running back because he's that good with the ball in his hands and after the catch. I'm gonna take note. USC was not great after the catch last year. And I don't, right, when you think of Makai Lemon, you think about him running after the catch. He was good, but overall not great. I think he brings some of that. And like I said, if you're going to take Makai, I'm going off the board, and I'm going to say Zacharias Williams shows up and makes an impact.
That's a strong answer. It's not the right answer, but it's a strong answer. I liked it. Greg, what do you have?
You know, sometimes the obvious is the obvious. It's Makai Lemon, because Makai Lemon could do so many things in so many areas if he gets the opportunity. Besides showing what he could do as a wide receiver, kick returner, punt returner. You know, back in the glory years of McKay stuff, he had Lynn Swan before he went to the other side of the world, so to speak. No, Makai Lemon is going to be a big time player. The only question about Makai Lemon is how many times they can get the football into his hands. And if they get it into his hands enough times and he can stay healthy, he could end up being an All-American. You know, I mean, these All-America teams that I've seen, and the magazines, a number of them are out. I always get amused by them because they're saying what they think a guy should be, as opposed to what he's already proven to be. And I think Makai Lemon is one of those players that in the end could be a first-team All-American if they do the right things, and if Jade Mayava can get him the ball enough times. He's a hell of a player.
That is the right answer. I'm going to give you a different one, though, just because, like Eric, I don't want to say the same thing. Lincoln Riley has done a very good job at selecting his transfer running backs. And I know people get frustrated sometimes because he brings in these transfers and he starts, but you know what? They've all been good. I'm going to go with Wayman Jordan. I think Wayman Jordan is going to have a big year. The problem defenses have against USC is that they can't really stack the box, not with Makai Lemon and Jacoby Lane. They can't. They have to respect the passing game. And so you have a lot of teams that try to play USC with 6 in the box, which is why USC has good rushing numbers in terms of yards per carry. I think the difference this year is I think Wayman Jordan is going to be much more difficult to bring down. And I think he's a guy who's going to have some big games. I don't know if he's going to break 70, 80-yard runs very often, probably won't. But I think he's a guy that can have a lot of 140, 150-yard games and make a huge difference. So Makai Lemon's the right answer. Eric's answer is a clever one. I wouldn't have thought of it. My answer, Wayman Jordan, is relatively safe because that guy's going to have a good year.
Look, we got Jacoby Lane's got to get mentioned too, right? Jacoby Lane is not going to have the longest play of the season offensively for USC, I'd assume, but he's going to have the most explosive moments, right? Yep. He's going to end up on the most highlight reel, like on the end of the most highlight reel catches, plays, that kind of thing. I mean, the confidence level that he played at this spring and just the stuff he does. I mean, the way he can adjust in the air, the fact that he's already 6 inches higher than any cornerback he's going to go against with that arm length and being able to get up. He's going to have some special ones this fall.
Jacoby Lane could be a first-round draft choice, and he could play in the NFL for 12 years if he wants that badly enough. And we're going to see this season. I mean, this is his opportunity to show that he's not just the guy who will disappear for 3 quarters and then make a spectacular one-handed grab in the corner of the end zone. He's a guy you can rely upon every series, the entire game. If that Jacoby Lane appears, Jacoby Lane will be the best offensive player on USC's team. And that's saying something because I think there's some pretty good players on that group. So we'll see. We'll see how badly Jacoby wants it. If Jacoby wants it as badly as Makai Lemon, then Jacoby will end up being the answer for all 4 of us when this season is over.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Can you go hitch and slant to him and he wins it every single time? Or are you trying to hit him, downfield against good coverage and he's got to make a great play? I mean, nobody's going to be Mike Williams, but you had Mike Williams on a hitch or a slant whenever you wanted him. Whenever you wanted him, he got that open, and you could do that. And I think that's kind of where Jacoby needs to win every single rep and be that kind of physical presence on the outside.
Can you get?
Yeah,
can you get Lane-
he's not going to be Mike Williams. He's not going to be Mike Williams, but maybe he can be Drake London. Maybe USC's had some big receivers recently who will go up and get the ball, and Jacoby Lane can do that as well as any of them could. Jacoby Lane is as good at going up and getting the ball as Drake London was. What he hasn't yet been is as consistent as Drake London was, and so we'll see whether he's got that in him. The feedback has been good during the offseason, but we'll know in September. Okay, guys, we still have the special going, right, Eric? $1, 1 week. Is that what it is?
Yep. First week, $1.
Welcome
And
Rivals fans, right?
And On3 just merged with Rivals. I have no idea what that's going to mean. I'm just going to say it's probably good for you. So go out and get your $1 and see what happens. And a lot of good content coming up, I think.
Chris, can I just interject?
Please.
We did mention it. I don't think it's a big deal at all, but Ryder Lyons committed, the quarterback that SC was once after. He committed today to BYU. And
Did that happen today?
No, it happened. It happened before. But Greg, I'm glad you brought it up because I still feel good about that pick. I think it was the right decision for Ryder Lyons. I think BYU is the place he should be, and I just hope that Dan Lanning can get over that. I hope. I don't know if he can. Okay, guys, I guess that's enough. We'll close it with a party shot at Dan Lanning, but a nice one. I didn't say anything mean about him. And until next week, everybody, fight on.
Right on.